Welcome to a new episode of Books to Last. This episode I'm joined by Jillian and Yolanda from the Pemberley Podcast. Please check the episode description as this episode may contain spoilers for the books mentioned. Hello and welcome to Books to Last, the podcast that challenges readers to pick the only 5 books they can take with them when cast away to a mystery remote location. As ever, I am joined by a book-loving guest, or in this case, 2 book-loving guests. And this episode, I'm joined by Yolanda and Jillian from the Pemberley Podcast. Welcome, guys. It's so great to have you on the podcast. How are you doing today?
We're doing great. It's a nice, cloudy, slightly rainy day for us in LA, which is so rare. So
It's a really big deal, actually.
Feels like a nice, cozy day to talk about books.
Yeah.
Yes, I have heard how rare those cloudy, cozy days in LA are. We have had rain and sunshine and wind, and it's been both warm and cold. So we've had all of the weathers here in the UK, which is pretty standard fare any time of the year. But that sort of autumn chill has started to creep in now, so you can kind of feel it a bit. It kind of makes sense to drink a hot coffee now instead of just like doing it for the fun of it. For the benefit of any listeners who might not be familiar with you guys and what you do, why don't you introduce both of yourselves and tell us a little bit about you guys and books and reading?
Yeah. So I'm Jillian.
I'm Yolanda.
And we have been running and hosting the Pemberley Podcast for a little over 6 years now. We met, so we were both huge fans of the web series, The Lizzie Bennet Diaries. And we loved it so much that we eventually ended up working for one of the creators of the show, Bernie Sue. And so we met as co-writing interns. And we had a very long way to commute because office was in LA. We are from a suburb about an hour outside LA. And so we had many a good commute together and many a discussion about, Lizzie Bennet Diaries, Pride and Prejudice, Hamilton, just like all the things that we love together. And Yolanda had the brilliant idea to start a podcast where we just talked about the Lizzie Bennet Diaries. And it's definitely taken off from there.
Yeah, I think initially we had that goal and we definitely completed that goal. And then we were like, well, what if we just keep going? What if we just keep covering Jane Austen adaptations and then Regency adaptations? So it's definitely evolved over time, but we just have a lot of fun doing it, and that's why we keep doing it. I think after each thing that we finish, we're like, do we want to still keep going? We're like, yeah, why not? So that's why we've been 6 years in, and we'll see how far we go.
Yeah,
so awesome. I mean, I mean, all the things that you guys enjoy and talk about on the podcast are all things I enjoy. So I'm very happy that you carry on going, because I've got a lot of backlog because I'm a bit late to the party with the podcast, but I'm definitely going to go back and have a look at some of the other stuff because I'm just big into all of it. Well, I mean, yeah, and it shows. And I've always been a big fan of Austen, but I've, for some reason, in all of my podcast listening, never actually ventured into the world of Austen podcasts until quite recently. And I was like, why have I not done this before? I have so much to learn.
Yeah. It's definitely like a growing space. I think when we started, there was maybe like a couple others that we knew of, and now I don't think we can really keep track anymore because there's always new Austen podcasts, which is awesome because there's just so many new perspectives and input, and so there's always so much more to learn and so many different ways in. So it's always great.
That's awesome. Is there anything that you guys have read recently that was particularly good? Anything that you've really enjoyed?
Jillian,
so
do you want to go?
Yeah, I mean, Yolanda's encouraging me because I was texting her about it last night and this morning. And it's not so much a book as it is a new Audible original. And I promise I don't Like, even though Jane Austen adaptations is a big part of my life, I promise I consume other media. We talk about it on the podcast, but Audible has just come out with a new original called Mrs. Wickham. And it basically takes place after the events of Pride and Prejudice, and we follow Lydia as she sort of deals with the consequences of marrying Wickham, finds a way to turn it around, and it's really good. I mean, it's basically the length of a movie, so I felt like I was watching a movie in my head, and it's just, I cried, I gasped a lot. Like it was like a gasping kind of audio series.
I've always wondered what happened to Lydia afterwards. I kind of, with a slight note of pity, just because whenever I think about it, I go, I mean, did they have kids? Did Lizzie and Darcy have kids? Do those kids like each other? Or are they those cousins that they don't like and they don't want to spend time with? Or are they the same as them? There's a whole thing there, but that sounds really interesting. I've recently picked up, I've bought The Murder of Mr. Wickham, which I want to try because it's like murder mystery, but it's all of Austen's characters and stuff. So yeah, I've been wanting to dig into that one. Yolanda, anything you've been reading?
Man, I've been reading a lot for work, actually. So we develop books to film, and so for what I do at my job. So I read a lot of books that aren't out yet that I'm excited about, which is always fun. But then it's like, wait, I can't talk about this for like a year, so no one's gonna know about it. But I'm trying to think, because I haven't been doing a lot of like my own reading, which it's like tough to separate work reading versus like personal fun reading. What am I reading?
What about any TV shows that have been recently released in the US that feature characters I like to think are kind of bookish? That recently came out on Netflix. The reason why you were late to recording last week.
Oh, Dairy Girls. I'm still watching Dairy Girls. Not a book, but still very fun. And so that's what I've been enjoying right now.
Yeah, Dairy Girls is like an iconic staple of like UK pop culture now. Yeah, it's
nice.
It's changed. There are like TV shows that come along in the UK, like a lot of them sort of fade into the background and they just become sort of history, and then there's some that are just so iconic that they just stand out in a way that all the others don't. So I've heard a lot about Dairy Girls. I can't say I've watched it because my list of stuff to watch is almost longer than my list of stuff to read.
Yes.
And I can't have multiple TV shows on at the same time, and I'm stuck in Downton Abbey at the moment because I got ill in like June, and I started watching it because I was like, oh, I need to watch this. This has been out forever. I should watch it. It's called a masterpiece classic. I should definitely watch it. But yeah, and then lots of tragic things happened, and it scared me off from the show. But I do need to go back to it. And Dairy Girls needs to be seen because it looks hilarious, and also Nicola from Bridgerton's in it. So.
Yes.
Yep, she started in this. And definitely Dairy Girls will be a great pick-me-up once you finish Downton Abbey, because I do know about all those tragic moments. That's the reason I stopped watching it.
I'm like I got a few seasons in, and I was speaking to someone, I was just like, they've killed off all my favourite characters. I literally don't, I have no reason to watch it anymore. They've killed off all my favourite characters.
Yeah.
It was like, oh yeah, just tragic. Just tragic. But what's not tragic is books, hopefully, most of the time. As mentioned before, our guests are going to pick their only 5 books they're going to be cast away to. As ever, they get to be cast away wherever they want to be, not just desert islands, because we are not a pro-desert island podcast. So you can be cast away together, or you can be cast away separately. Whereabouts would you like to be cast away to?
I like the idea of like each having our own space, but then having some kind of shared space to be able to come together.
We're definitely those kinds of people where it's like, I do want to see you, but in terms of like being, like exiled to an island, like I know we're gonna need space.
Like I'm imagining, this is my ideal, is like our 2 own beach houses, and like the sand is like the actual beach is our shared space.
Yeah, like we're like next door to each other, and then we come out maybe at night we can build a fire and like have our time together. Then during the day we can just like, you can take walks on the beach. Like that
Yeah.
sounds like a really great. Do we need to pick like a specific, can we just say like a beachy island, or do we have to pick a place in the world?
No, it can be completely imaginary. We've had people invent their own countries in order to be
Ooh.
isolated too.
That's
And then we have other people who literally have they have a location, they have a town, they have like a postcode in their mind for where they're going to be cast away to, and they know exactly where it is. So yeah, it varies. Everyone has varying views on whether it has to be a geographical location. We've also had space, and and a lot of things, and also some mythological places. So yeah, you guys, you are more than welcome to have your separate beach houses.
The sky's the limit. Wow. I feel like, what about, Yolanda, what about like an island off the coast of like Genovia?
Ooh.
If we're like coming up with fake countries, like I can't imagine a place more peaceful,
All the pears that we don't get to eat and enjoy.
Yeah, instead of like coconut trees, it's like there are pears growing there. We know there's peace. We know, based on what the internet thinks, it would be 0 COVID cases.
Anne Hathaway is our queen, so I like
it. Sounds like like she'd probably be on the stamps for when we like. I don't know if we can write to people on our desert island, but like she's on the stamp,
I like this. This is a good direction.
This is getting good.
This is a fully formed idea. Yeah, I like it. Well as starting your fires and eating pears and taking your beach walks, you'll have lots of time to get reading done on beach houses. So I suppose we could probably start off with the first book you guys want to take with you to your own private island off the coast of Genovia.
Yeah.
Do we want to start with did you choose the book that we both have on our list?
Yes.
Okay. Do we want, since it's probably our only shared book, do we want to talk about it together?
Let's start there.
All right.
Sounds like a great place to start. What's the first book?
It's a pretty obvious one. It's Pride and Prejudice. Our podcast is literally called the Pemberley Podcast. And while we've never actually talked about Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, we have talked about everything else that has been based on that. Well, not everything, but there are definitely, it is the foundation of a lot of the things that we talk about. A lot of my favorite quotes are from that book. So that's why it's on my list.
I feel like it's one of those books that you can just read and you find something new each time, and you can just get lost in all the world and the text. And so it's a really fun read, but then it's just, there's so many like rich characters and dialogue, and it's been so much of like what's been the inspiration of why we started this podcast, our podcast too. And so I feel like from there, it was kind of for different reasons we found these books and Jane Austen, and then we found each other, and like spawned all this great stuff that's followed.
It's a good classic choice, a favorite of guests of the podcast. Definitely, it's been picked many a time, but I don't think that's it's for good reason every time. It's definitely one of my favorite ones. It's my first experience with Jane Austen. When I studied it at school in English, and I remember just devouring it, and I completely get that. And I didn't appreciate the idea of getting more from it every time until I started to reread it like a slow, informal reread recently, and just finding Mr. Bennet in the first few chapters even more hilarious than I found him the first time, because I don't know, maybe it's because I'm married now and I was like a child when I read that, but just like the picture of Mr. and Mrs. Bennet's marriage is just even richer to me now as an adult.
It's a real thing. It's like to read it at different stages in your life. It kind of like unlocks something new each time too.
Yeah, and like I say, the namesake of the podcast, I recently went to the National Trust site where the parts of Pemberley were filmed for the BBC adaptation, the 6-part miniseries, and I had to try so hard not to nerd out because I was with my teenage cousins who are boys and they don't get it, and I was just like having to really control myself. It was hard, and I still call it Pemberley. It's not what it's called. It's called Lime, but in my head it's Pemberley.
I feel like it would have been a great opportunity to educate them about that stuff. Like, not saying I would have done this, but I would have done this of just taking screenshots of the angles and, you know, the exteriors of Lime and just being like, you see, this is why it's really Pemberley, you know?
Yeah, I can't say that they've read it. I'm probably going to take them back at some point just because I'm going to go again, and they really enjoyed it because the grounds are just nice anyway. But they do have a walk, like that's like a sheet you can take, and it's like a planned walking route where it takes you along all of the filming locations, including the pond where they swim, which is actually they call Darcy's Pond now, and then the sort of angle where you see the house when they're coming down the carriage, but it's like an hour and a half walk that does all of the routes, and I didn't know about it until we were about to leave, and I was devastated. So I need to go again. It's really not far from me. It's like a 45-minute drive. I should go more often.
Jealous.
You should go I'm now thinking that, like, Yolanda, you and I need to take a pilgrimage there, and we need to take this walk, and
We've
no one will watch it. We've talked about it, but like, we should, now that I know that there's this official walk and that they've like really leaned into the fandom, I'm like, hold us back, you know?
Well, it's one of those things I just like, with it being so close, I'm like, you know what? I could just take my laptop and work there.
Can you just hang around there for free?
Well, I've got a membership, so you can just walk around as long as it's open. The grounds, they have opening times and stuff, but they have like a tea room and then like a used bookstore there as well. And then yeah, is it a tea room or a snack bar? I think it might be a snack bar at this one. There's different National Trust operates sites all across the country, and this is just one of them. But yes, it's great if you're ever in the UK. If you're used to traveling distances in America, no traveling distance in the UK will faze you. So if you're ever even remotely in the UK, probably worth to pop in there.
It's good to know.
Yeah.
Well, Pride and Prejudice, a great, solid classic start. I feel like I probably should have seen it coming, but I think part of me was just like, I don't know if I can predict anything in this. So what is the second book you'll be taking with you with this staple classic?
You want to go first, Yolanda?
Sure. I mean, I don't have like a particular order because I was just like, wait, I need to pick 5 books. So I don't know if this like exactly pairs with Pride and Prejudice. It doesn't, but it does. This author does take up a lot of shelf space on my bookshelf. So I went with the John Green book, The Fault in Our Stars. It was one of those. I had been like a longtime fan of John Green and his videos and seeing his dynamic with his brother Hank. And it led me to his books. And I think this book was the first one that I like, that it was like an anticipated release for me. Like I had been waiting for it, and when it arrived I was so excited. And even though it's very sad, and I think you definitely cry, I cried when I was reading it, definitely the movie too, but I just really enjoy his writing and his voice, and I think he has such a great way with understanding or being able to convey like the teenage voice in such a unique way. And maybe it's not always the way teenagers speak, and because they're maybe a little more eloquent, but I've always really enjoyed his books. So I would pick The Fault in Our Stars.
Wonderful. It's another one that I think, because I suppose partly because of the film, everybody's quite familiar with, but might not have, I don't know, because I often think films either have the effect of getting everyone to read the book, or everybody just watches the film and then they kind of forget about the book. And I don't really know I think John Green, I remember when that film came out, there was a real sort of swell around his work. Because I can't think of a better way of saying it, but I hadn't heard of him previously to that, and then it was like every time I went into the bookstore there was sort of featured shelves and that sort of thing. But John Green is also a favorite of guests on the podcast. We've had Looking for Alaska, I think, has been picked a couple of times because for differing reasons, different for every individual. Jillian, would you have expected that, do you think? Or
I would, because you know, like I said, when Yolanda and I first met and we were bonding over all the things that we love, I mean, like we both came from this sort of nerd fighteria like community. We went to VidCon together years ago, where, you know, we went to be a part of the online community that was really born from the Green Brothers videos. I also love this book. I'm glad she chose it. But yes, I would say this is a good Yolanda book.
Well, I mean, presumably you've not picked this one for your second book. So what would be the second book that you are going to be taking with you to your beach house?
I will give another sort of in this like community that the Green Brothers created. One of the authors that they also endorsed and supported was Rainbow Rowell, and my favorite book of hers is Fangirl, which is, you know, about this sort of shy girl who, it's like takes place over her freshman year of college, and she's got an identical twin sister, so she's used to being part of a set, and her sister, who has the much stronger, bolder personality, wants to really be her own person. And so she's kind of like feeling alone and feeling like she's kind of got to discover who she is on her own for the very first time. And like, she's a huge, like in the book, there's this very Harry Potter-esque world called Simon Snow that she's like the biggest fan of, and she writes her own fan fiction, which would eventually become its own book, Carry On Simon Snow.
I was going to say, yeah. Isn't that one of her books?
Yeah, no, but it's literally about this huge fangirl her freshman year of college. And you know, I chose it because, like, I remember when I read it, I think I was like a little bit out of college when I read it, and I was like, oh, this is very close to, I feel like I remember thinking this is probably who I would have been if I hadn't met my best friend in college. Like, if I had to do it alone, this is probably how I would have felt. And I related to her.
It's nice when a main character is sort of, you feel seen by a main character in a way. It's like when I suppose when it connects to parts of you that other people wouldn't necessarily maybe know about, or aren't sort of the most visible ones. So yeah, Fangirl, it's one of those ones that, you know, when you know the cover of the book, you know who it's about, you just know it, even though you've never read it. It's just so, I feel like any bookstore would be kind of missing it. I just feel like I've seen it so many times, but I've never actually had the sort of chance to, well, I say the chance, I've never gotten around to read it. I think around about the time that like I say, with John Green and Rainbow, and when I suppose these books came out, I don't know, what was I reading? I think I was probably still very deep into my Percy Jackson phase and reading those. So I think that's probably why I ended up missing it. But it seems like they're books that seem to be sort of fan favorites in a way that people come back to them, and then they sort of don't need to be during the release phase, I suppose.
Yeah.
But I mean, they seem like they're both kind of nostalgic picks for the two of you, sort of really long-term favorites. So is nostalgia sort of a common theme within your lists, do you think? Or do you think it sort of spans?
I think for mine, I was realizing like some of my picks aren't nostalgic for me, because I think at the start of the pandemic, I started to go back to a lot of books that I just enjoyed in my youth, because I was not in a place where I felt like I could really concentrate on new books or really focus enough to like dive into something new. And so I just went back to like books I loved. And I feel like those books are the ones that kind of got me back into reading and getting into more of a regular cadence to like, now, okay, what's new? What's new out there, and finding new stories. But yeah, I would say for me, like my list is a little more nostalgic than maybe some other lists.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think that I've discussed the two books that are the most nostalgic. I really was agonizing over a lot of books that I loved like in middle school and in high school, because I really don't mind reading like younger books anymore, because, you know, just sort of to have a fondness for like who I was when I read those books, and like, you know, how I related as like a student versus like a grown-up, which I like technically am but don't really feel all the time.
Yeah, I get
but
that.
yeah. But, you know, I feel like I've also some of like my new favorite books that I have read in the last like 3 or 4 years. And so I was just sort of thinking to my gut, like if I had like a bunch of books to like save in a fire kind of a thing, like what could I feel like I not live without because it means or has meant so much to me.
It's a good way of thinking about it. People do tend to agonize over this, and I'm completely I get what you mean with the reading during during the lockdown. I think I went the opposite way in terms of I just couldn't I completely shut down and was able to, I like couldn't read because it was just, that was I guess my reaction in the moment to it. But I have gone back to rereading some stuff when I was younger, and it's just sometimes it's just nice, it's familiar, it's like a safe place that you can just come back to. But equally, I've just, when there's so many good books coming out, it's kind of hard sometimes, isn't it? So yeah, I'm very glad I've never had to write my list, basically, because my list is endless because I'm in charge of the Castaway company. So yeah, I'm glad I've never had to think about it. But I suppose that my time's probably running out on that one. I can only probably do the podcast for so long before it becomes a requirement. But today is not that day. What I mean, moving on to the third book, what's that going to be for your initially sort of nostalgic list?
Yeah, mine's fully nostalgic, I will say. So I'll keep going on that route. So my next book's probably a little unexpected for you, Jillian, but it's called All American Girl by Meg Cabot. Meg Cabot falling into the Princess Diaries Genovia theme that we didn't plan out, but I guess it falls nicely into that. But All American Girl was a book I think I had borrowed from a classmate in when I was like in 7th grade or something, and I just held on to it and I kept it, and she let me have it. So she let me have it. It's fine. So,
I was going to say the ultimate crime until you got permission.
Yes, no. But I reread it in the pandemic, or like during lockdown, and it's actually the most absurd concept. But I remember when I read it, I could like so visualize it, and that was definitely in a time where I was like wanting to work in film and wanting to see like what the possibilities were with writing. And so for me, like reading that book, I felt like it was so visual, and I just like devoured it, and it kind of inspired a lot more of like what could it look like to be in and to work in something where I actually could make this a reality. And still working my way up, still trying to get there, but I really enjoyed the book, and it's such a wacky concept, but it's a lot of fun.
I don't think I actually know about All American Girl. So, I mean, what's it about, sort of briefly?
Basically, it's set in Washington, D.C., and this like kind of girl who's a little kind of like the black sheep of her family. She's ditched like this class she needs to go to, and the presidential motorcade comes by. She basically stops like an assassination attempt, and through that she becomes like a national hero. And of course, like the president has like this young son who's like just her age, and so
of course
a romance sparks between them.
The dream.
So it's like the most absurd way into a story, but then it plays out in this really fun, great way.
Right, that sounds so fun. Yeah, to be I was gasping when you said that you kept the book. But I owned my first copy of Percy Jackson because I definitely stole that from like one of the reading shelves in school.
My gosh, from a library.
Technically a library book, but then they sort of did this thing where they put selections of books in the classroom so that you had something.
Right.
And I saw it, and it was the movie cover with Logan Lerman on it, and I was like, oh, I'm going to read that. And then it just never went back. Yeah, I hope my librarian from high school isn't listening to this.
You could get seriously fined.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to... Yeah, I'm not. I won't think about it. Miss Lee probably doesn't. It's fine. Well, I mean, that sounds like a really, really fun intro to a story, and yeah, that sounds. Of course, he's got a son that is the same age. I just love it. I love how there is sort of things that people would never accept as coincidence in real life. But like, it's just like, yeah, that's completely realistic. It's a book.
Yes.
Of course it is. Of course it is. That's what happens. Jillian, what's the third book on your list?
Mine, I think Yolanda will agree, is very expected of me. It's called The Kiss Quotient by Helen Hoang. Yeah, exactly. That's the
reaction.
In my opinion, there's like two kinds of people in the world: people who love this book and like the people who haven't read it yet. Because when I first read this, I was so evangelical about it. I think I like shoved my copy at Yolanda and I was like, yeah, you have to read this. And pretty much everyone I think I've loaned it to has read it within like 48 hours, because I chose it because I feel like it was really one of the first romance novels as I was getting into romance that I really couldn't put down. And for those of you who don't know, it's about Stella Lane, who is an econometrician with autism spectrum disorder, who in an effort to try and conquer dating, decides that she first needs to be good at sex, and she hires it's a reverse Pretty Woman. She hires a gorgeous male escort to basically teach her about that stuff, and it's so crazy because they fall in love for real. And it's just like, I feel like the main character, Michael Larson is just like perfect.
Look at you remembering his fake name and everything.
His fake name, yeah, absolutely. It's just like, it makes me so happy, and I love the book, and I think everyone should read it.
Yeah, well, I do happen to know at least one person who doesn't like it, who has read it, but
that's not true.
Shocking.
But it is a book that is very special to me personally, and I love it. The whole series, just the whole of the Chris Quotient series, is just like one of my absolute favorites. But yeah, it's very sort of important book to me, just because Stella as a character in this. Talking about relating to characters earlier, Stella was like the first person in books, sort of the first main character, at least, is that definitely from like a first person narrative type thing, and that I ever felt like I related to, like as in on like a fundamental, these could be my own thoughts kind of level, and it kind of set me on the path to exploring my own mind and maybe what that might mean, because it sort of triggered a lot of questions and stuff, which is a journey I'm still on, so I won't bore anybody with it now. It's such a good book. It's just I just love it. It's so good. It's so happy. It's so funny. The characters are just so good. I'm the same. I recommend it to anyone who loves romance and also doesn't mind some spice, because there are some people who prefer romance without it.
I consider this a gateway. There are a few gateway books for people who maybe like haven't gotten into romance and should, and this is one that I definitely recommend to people. Yes, with spice.
Yes. But it's a great book, and another personal favorite of mine. Look at this, multiple books coming out. So yeah, I mean, both very fun third picks. So, gosh, we're on the fourth book already. What is the fourth book you'll be taking with you to your beach houses?
I'll follow on the romance theme. This is a YA book, but it's still romance. I picked Anna and the French Kiss by Stephanie Perkins. I feel like this was one of the romance books that kind of got me then into the genre, then more into adult romance, because I read it a little later once I was like already out of school, and so I had went back to read it because a friend of mine had like always liked it and always told me to read Stephanie Perkins, and I never did when I was younger. So then I read it later and I was like, wait, this is so good, I want to be in this world. And basically it's about this girl in her final year of school. She goes to boarding school in Paris, and it's like this American school or a kind of international school, so there's kind of students from everywhere, and it's like very dreamy, and she's kind of the new kid, but she gets accepted into the friend group, and of course there's like this gorgeous guy who's there, and so but he's with someone else, so it's like forbidden, and so she can't really be with him. But it's a lot of fun, and you're just like, wait, I wish I had gone to boarding school in Paris. That could have been my life. And you're like, wait, no, I've been out of school for years. I can't do that anymore. So you can only dream.
I think it also really explains. Oh, sorry, just.
Oh no, you go on.
I think it explains the Anna and the French kiss to Emily in Paris pipeline, if you will.
Ooh, that's a good point.
I was like, I get the kind of dreamy, like this doesn't really happen to people, but if it were going to go this way, it's like a very charmed, version of what
it's literally the American perspective of what
the American perspective of like a charmed life in Paris.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, I think the way that especially with boarding school stories, because like I was definitely of this when I was younger. I mean, possibly sort of born out of maybe like Harry Potter, but also like literally any TV show that even remotely featured a boarding school when I was younger. Like the idea of a school that you also sleep at was just so like ridiculously fun sounding, despite the fact that when you actually either know the reality or really sat down to think about it, you'd know that it wasn't. Like Wild Child as a movie, I wanted that to be.
Well, and I think another important question to ask is, did you read the Madeline books as a kid? Could that have been a contributing factor?
No, I don't think I did, and probably a good job, because I was already asking my parents to send me off to boarding school, and I don't think they needed much more encouragement in the form of books that I was obsessed with. But I mean, Anna and the French, I feel like it's either been an honorable mention or it has been picked on the podcast before. Another one I've not read, but I do also think there's something to be said about, I suppose, maybe the American perception of the romantic life in Paris. I've only been to Paris once, and it was with a school trip, and school trips in Paris don't live up to the hype that it is that is portrayed in TV shows. I feel like I need to go as an adult under my own steam to be able to have a fully formed opinion of it.
I feel like you're under like a timetable too. Like you're like, you need to hit all the spots, all the touristy things, and they're like, all right, get back on the bus and we're going.
Yeah,
pretty much. And I think we were given like French phrases we were supposed to be using, and we were being and that sort of thing. So it was a test essentially, and just being trooped around, and me seeing how quickly I could be served with a croissant whilst the column of students were moving up the street. If I ran to like a street vendor, gave them €1, got a croissant, ran, got back into my place in the queue without losing them, which was a bit of a daring game. But it's such a very nice idea, but I don't know. I do wonder about the validity of romantic boarding school attachments as well, because that just seems I mean, I'm very much of the school opinion of you don't go out with people you work with or go to school with, and the idea of going out with someone that you go to boarding school with just sounds like trouble.
Sounds messy. And messy. I think that's the thing with books and romance is like you're like in this dreamy world. You're like, everything's fine, nothing is messy, and if it is, it gets resolved in like the next couple chapters. Not real life, and that's why we love books.
Yep.
Yeah, and if it does get messy, it's not messy in your life. It's messy in this fictional character's life, and you don't have to deal with it.
And it's a glamorous boarding school, and it's charming, and it's not in any way small or cramped with utilitarian kind of dorm furniture. Like that's not how it is.
No.
Yeah.
It reminds me very much of Sandhya Menon did the she wrote the When Dimple Met Rishi series, and
I've read that book. That's great.
Yeah, and
that was like camp, right? That was like computer camp at Stanford or something like that.
Yeah, so the first one was like computer camp at Stanford, and then they sort of go through the friendship group with the sequels, which is actually really fun. And then there's one that's in the same format, but it's not in the same school or friendship group, so which I also really enjoyed. But she also wrote, sorry, I am looking at my bookshelves because the Rosetta Academy novels, which are sort of
Ooh.
young adult boarding school like stories based on fairy tales.
Love it.
So like
already in.
Fairy tale retelling. So the first one was like Beauty and the Beast. I don't know what the second one is because I've not read it yet, but the first one is kind of fun. It's very much like, it is very much young adult. I have to sort of get into my teenager mindset to read them, but they are very fun, and they're set in a very glamorous boarding school in I want to say like Switzerland or France, or I don't know, somewhere that's snowy. It's in the mountains. People ski there, somewhere like that.
Love that.
Never been skiing, so I
can't speak to it either.
We're in Southern California, like, I mean, kind of like in the UK, there's not like a lot of mountains for you. And
No.
in Southern California, there's not a ton of snow. Not that there's not skiing, but it's just not a lot of snow.
There's not a lot of weather here. So.
Not a lot of weather. That's why the fog out, the clouds and the rain are like massive for us.
Yeah, it's I will say the snow that we get, at least in England, I think Scotland get real snow, but in England we don't get real snow. We get slush. It comes down, it looks pretty for 5 minutes, and then it's slush.
Got it.
But yeah, I've never been skiing, but I don't think you can. Can you do proper skiing in this country? I don't think you can. I think you have to thingy, but it's something that people who come from backgrounds different to mine, that's what they do on holiday.
Yeah. I'm thinking Bridget Jones' The Edge of Reason. I'm also thinking Bridget Jones's Diary in terms of like the snow in London kind of a situation. That's what I'm picturing.
It looks magical. It looks beautiful. And you're like, no, that's not the reality of what happened.
No, that could be the reality if anyone in England knew how to drive when the weather was anything other than cloudy. Basically,
we have that problem too.
We can drive in cloudy, but is it too hot? No, can't get anywhere. If it's too hot, can't get anywhere. If it's too rainy, can't get anywhere if it snows.
All right.
So yeah, it's cloudy or nothing. It's like we're non-functional in any other form of weather. So we would be in trouble, I think, if we were forced into an American climate. But so that's a strange tangent to get to from Anna and the French Kiss. But since we're going all over the place, Jillian, what's the fourth book you'll be taking with you?
So mine is a graphic novel that I first started reading online, Olympus by Rachel Smythe. For that, I can tell you immediately recognize it. When you mentioned Percy Jackson, I was like, she'll know, she'll get it. And this is another story that I've been very passionate about making everyone read it. And I first discovered it just online on Webtoons. You can read it for free. You can, get the updates live, and it has now been turned into like a hardcover graphic novel series that has hit the number one. Yeah, it's a New York Times bestseller, and so that's where I'm justifying it like it's a book. I can totally, even though I mostly read it online, but it's basically just a modern retelling of the Hades and Persephone romance. She makes it a real romance. I mean, really, like, I'm not kidding when I say, like, I sort of decided to read someone that I worked for at the time wrote an article mentioning this, and I was like, I'll just like try it out. I'll just like start reading it. And it was a Friday, and I remember like starting it in the morning. I think there were only like 60 something episodes at the time. And like, I'm not kidding when I say like, I couldn't stop reading it. I could not get anything else done. I had to get to the end of this. And there really is no end, which is another thing I love about it. Like, it can't ever end. So, I really love this book. And I actually had the pleasure of meeting Rachel a couple years ago at Comic-Con, and I got a little special enamel pin from her, and I'm just the biggest fan of this story of Olympus, and just like the way that she, like, what she does with all the characters. Like, it's all based on like the Greek gods and Greek mythology, but like I feel like you don't have to know the intricacies of those stories in order to really enjoy this, because kind of like with Pride and Prejudice, I mean, I love like the quotes, like I love what they say, I love the dialogue, and like everyone just like, she goes really in depth on the characters, and they're just so fully formed, and I just love it so much.
Yeah, it's a very distinctive book. I bought it for my best friend, who she and I have, our friendship is born out of our mutual, well, we both sort of fell in love with Percy Jackson at the same time, and so we kind of had this like Greek mythology nerdiness sort of start at the same time, and then we went through that series. So when I saw Lore Olympus sort of taking off, and they had these gorgeous hardcover volumes and stuff, I knew I had to get it her, because I was just like, it's just so pretty and it's so distinctive in the style. I love what they've done with the illustration as well. It's not in this Adventure Time school of animation that is just everywhere. It's even infiltrated Scooby-Doo. It makes me so sad. It's not a slight on Adventure Time. It was doing something different at the time. I dislike how all cartoons look exactly the same now. That is my primary concern. And they should not have let it anywhere near Scooby-Doo. There was nothing wrong with Scooby-Doo. Very passionate about Scooby-Doo, but yes,
yeah, I can tell.
Lore Olympus is, I think, gorgeous. I think, the fact that it's still accessible online is interesting to me, because I would have thought that once it got published, I don't know, some big publishing house company would have been like, no, we're going to take that off, because like they do that with fan fiction, when fan fiction turns into, or Wattpad stories get turned into stories.
I mean, I think it really shows, I mean, and it's another reason that I think I really love to, like, I mean, I feel like whenever I like something like this, it's usually something with a really big fandom. And I think that her fandom, it just goes to show how enormous and how loyal and how dedicated they are, that this can concurrently exist online completely for free and still shoot to the #1 of the New York Times.
Very true.
By buying, like, you don't have to buy. I don't really read the books that I have, but I'm just, of course, someone that, not sitting in front of my bookshelf right now, but I have like many book piles and bookshelves and book carts to kind of accommodate everything that I have. And, you know, I bought it because I just love to have those things. And it's really like art is another reason why I have it on the list. It's just like, I feel like you could lift so many moments from the comic, and I would be happy to put it in a frame and hang it on my wall, and it would make me so happy. I also kind of feel like this is not like a hard opinion, it's a soft opinion, but it is, I feel like the personalities of Hades and Persephone are very like Lizzie Bennet, Mr. Darcy-esque, and I just love those tropes. And I think it's really awesome.
Well, I imagine, from what I know of the mythology, because despite the fact that I am familiar with Lore Olympus and I do own it, I'm horrendous for. Basically, if I buy a book, there's a good chance it means that I'm not going to read it anytime soon. It's like it's not good. It's not good.
Sure, it's understandable.
It's a habit I need to work on, but maybe I should just read the webcomic instead. And then I will just do what you did and just read it all in one go. Because I could see that happening. But it's not. Greek mythology is, very much a product of its time, which is, a long time ago. And some of the themes in it can be problematic, I suppose, is maybe the phrase. So, like, some of the stories,
it can be really violent and it can really suck. And, but another thing I like about this is, there are certainly, it started as like an oral tradition. And, I feel like it didn't 100% get written down until hundreds of years later. But what was I gonna say? Sorry, I forget my train of thought a lot, but I had something. But one of the things I really do love about this is I feel like a lot of like Greek mythology, like movies that get made or books that get written, like really center around wars or like your male heroes. And I really like that this is just like a group of like interpersonal drama. Like at the end of the day, that's all it is. It's like it's it's a really slow burn between Hades and Persephone, and that's kind of our like focal point. But every other character is like going through their own trials and tribulations, and there's no war, and it is very female centric. And I really like Rachel Smythe is just like such a crazy talented writer for just really giving, like, there's no prose, it's all dialogue, and you see everything happen and you just like get who all these people are.
Yeah, definitely. And I think just, if you were to take all of the murder and war out of Greek mythology, it is pure. It's a soap opera of just pure drama of like literally just a family that cannot get on.
Yeah.
Like at all. And yeah, I find that that's a really interesting take on it. And I think I might be wrong in saying this, but from the perspective that I was looking at, I feel like Lore Olympus and sort of the big fandom that sort of accumulated around it is one of the main drivers behind I've seen a huge uptick in the number of Hades and Persephone retellings that have come in prose.
I also feel like, you know, in the same with something Yolanda and I have talked a lot about is every like couple of years Jane Austen has like another moment, you know, 1995 miniseries, 2005 movie. This is a big year for Jane Austen. I think, you know, between Hades Town, a couple other like really hot selling Greek mythology erotica novels by Katie Robert, and like tons of like your Song of Achilles. Like I think that
Percy Jackson getting a TV show finally.
Percy Jackson coming back. I do think that like these stories are kind of having another moment. There's like another resurgence going on, and you know, I mean, perhaps, I mean, like, I would love to say, like, Lore Olympus started it all. None of you cared about it until, I don't think that's true. But I do think it is part of this, like, moment that it's having thousands of years later.
I hadn't necessarily seen it as part of the general, I mean, you're completely right. There's definitely a massive, like, uptick in, like, Greek mythology stuff. Because, I mean, like, Natalie Haynes, for instance, who's been writing in the area for it, I think she's had, like, loads of books come out recently. And, like Ariadne, and there's a lot of sort of Greek mythology books that are coming out. But I guess part of my brain, even though they're absolutely central to like Greek mythology, but like part of my brain was literally kind of focused on specifically Hades and Persephone, and I just sort of was seeing that as like an isolated event. But no, you're completely right. There's definitely been like a huge. I mean, I'm personally very happy about that because I have wanted them to do a TV show of Percy Jackson that was cast with age appropriate actors for years. So I'm so glad that there's this new swell around it. And it's great. And yeah, Lore Olympus is a part of that, and it's always nice to have a mix of mediums as well. I mean, you mentioned that it was an oral tradition, but it's now being translated into, I mean, literal artwork, because like it is a stunning graphic novel. So yeah, and definitely counts as a book because they are published. I mean, if you were going to be taking if you were forced to take volume 1 or volume 2 or something like that, would you be able to pick?
You wound me. Well, it's funny because volume 3 just came out. I haven't bought it yet, but I'm also, because it's like, I'm not going to read it. I just want to have it. And I keep doing this to myself, that just books that I just want to possess. Oh, it's, you know what? I'm going to say, I think I just want to say volume 1 because I think the scene that really hooked me into Lore Olympus was, so for those of you who are starting, it's like Aphrodite and Eros kind of play a cruel trick on her and put her in the backseat of Hades' car. So he like drives her to the underworld, discovers her, puts her up in the guest room. She wakes up the next day and they like have coffee together. And so it's the first time she's meeting him. And one of my favorite banter scenes is like that scene where she calls him out for being like 30% scoundrel. You know, like he's like the king of the underworld. And she's like, and like, did you ask who I am? Like, I'm someone too. Like, and on the one hand, she's kind of shy and insecure about like, oh, he's important. But also, you know, she asserts herself as well. And we meet the dogs, and it's just like, you know, it's where the seed of their love is planted in that scene. And I go back, like when it was just online, I take Lore Olympus screenshots. There's a whole album in my phone of Lore Olympus screenshots, and those are some of my favorite.
Okay. You may have derailed my entire weekend plans now, because now you're making me
I assure you I have.
You're making me want to experience the sort of domestic bliss of the underworld.
Have you not read it at all, or you're just sort of like...
No, genuinely. Okay, so this is the thing. I can't start things like that, especially things that have no end, because they literally take over my entire life. Like you just said, like I read, the Under the Oak Tree web novel that gets advertised on Instagram like all the time. I started reading that online, and genuinely, I started reading on holiday, and I did nothing else for the entire holiday.
I mean, hang on. I just want to look up really quickly how many episodes there are, because like I said, when I started reading it in like 2018, there was only like 60 episodes, and I thought I got through a lot. There are now 213 episodes. So, it's crazy. And they're short, but I mean, there are so many, and you want to take a beat to look at the images and just really take in the art. But no, I mean, if I could peer pressure you to read this at your earliest convenience, like, go for it.
I mean, 200 episodes of like 20-minute long cartoons still takes time to get through. So, no, I'm going to have to exercise some restraint, because I have a couple of buddy reads, and I also have a book that I'm reading at the moment that is long, so I should do that. So I'm going to exercise some self-restraint and not Google where I find it to start.
Okay, if you want.
I will let you... If you find my Instagram story completely full of this, you know exactly why. But, okay, right. So we're on the fifth and final book. What is the last book that you will be taking with you when you're cast away?
This was tough. I feel like I put together a whole list of books that I was like, I need to narrow this down. And so this was more a recent read, but I would pick Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan. I feel like this was the book that I was like so nervous when they announced it was going to get made into a movie, because I was like, there's no way they can capture this this whole world and just exactly
be done.
Yes, it cannot be done, which they did a beautiful job. But I feel like even then, obviously it's tough to condense such like a long story into a 2-hour movie. So there's still a lot of great moments from the book that I feel like were left out, or there's details of relationships that I feel like could have added more to what was seen. But even so, I feel like the book was really good and really well done. And I just think there's like a lot of really great detail to the characters there. And Astrid is definitely my favorite character in the book, and played by Gemma Chan in the movie. So I feel like she did really great by portraying what I pictured as Astrid in the book to movies. So I feel like that was a very satisfying read and watch to compare and contrast.
It's always so good when the on-screen adaptions don't break your heart, I think, is probably where the line should start. Like, because with most books, they'll never live up to it, but when they don't completely destroy the source material,
right?
It's always good. And if they're enjoyable, all the better. I own Crazy Rich Asians because I found it in my local independent bookstore, and I was like, I'm gonna buy it. And I've been recommended it by several friends, and I want to. I've also kind of wanted to watch the film, but I am a purist in the case that I do really want to read it before I watch it, because I like it. I want to be able to pick out all of the moments they don't include, basically.
Yeah, I feel like the opening scene of the book is the same as the movie, which like I feel like rarely happens when it's like they actually match the two things. And I feel like that opening scene in the book was like really important. Like, this is actually what sets up just how wealthy this family is, and it kind of immediately takes you in, and you're like, wow, this is the world we're getting into. So for the movie to start in the same way, and I'm avoiding spoilers for you so you can read it and enjoy it, I feel like it translated really well to the screen.
Also, you're gonna have such fun conversations on your beach about all of the books you're reading. It's gonna be amazing.
Yeah. It's gonna be a good time.
It's gonna be a great time.
It's the Desert Island Book Club. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a great one to round off your list, Yolanda. Jillian, what are you bringing it home with?
So I also agonized over this one because there are so many books that I love, but another book series that we were talking about before we even started recording is the Rajay family series by Sonali Dev. And I agonized even more to pick one of the 4 amazing books that are out there. But I ended up going with Incense and Sensibility just because it's my favorite title of the 4 of them. Like, she's so clever with the title,
smart.
but I think
So
it is
smart.
the most clever. And all these books sort of peripherally revolve around the brother running for governor of California, and this is the one where like he is our romantic hero. And I don't know, I just like love the politician and the yoga teacher. They kind of balance each other out really nicely. So I feel like if I had, I mean, it's so hard to decide, but like if I had to only read one of these books, like take one of these books from the series, I think for me it's that one.
I also really loved this one, Installment of the Rajays. It's definitely up there with my favorites. I always tie it between that and Recipe for Persuasion. I feel like Recipe for Persuasion might, but I don't know. I really no, I can't pick. I don't.
I mean, it's hard, but here's what I will say: like, I feel like Recipe for Persuasion made me like Persuasion more, just because of the way that she like shaped these characters. And like, you know, I think in Persuasion she's such a shy main character that it's kind of hard to like give her action, but just, you know, the way that she describes like her anxiety and her past and like, you know, the relationship that she has with Rico Silva is just like unmatched.
Yeah, it's maybe I don't know. I'm trying, because then I was just like, maybe it's because I think I like Rico more, but do I like Rico more because I really like Yosh? So this is just an impossible decision. Basically, what we're saying is listeners should read all of them and not pick favorites.
Exactly.
I totally agree with that, but one of your rules was we couldn't pick series, so I was like, all right, if I have
absolutely,
to. If I have
absolutely
to.
True. This is informal advice that you get in addition to the recommendation.
Yeah, we were sent guidelines and I listened. But no, it's a great book, and it's also on my list of like book series that should be movies or TV or whatever, but is not yet.
It would be a good set of films, but I feel like you wouldn't maybe get all of the film. I feel like they'd try and get multiple books into a film, whereas if you did a TV series, they could probably give everyone their real focus.
If you do the TV series, like, I mean, this is one of those books that, you know, at the end of the day, it's like these interpersonal relationships, and it's this, you know, the kids of this family who are, you know, in their 20s and 30s finding love, and, you know, it's like it's a dating story, it's a workplace story, it's a family story, it's a you know, hero's journey in its own right, heroine's journey, and I just feel like they're so great.
It is, and it's also really visual. I feel like they could definitely get they could do such a good job. I mean, definitely once they're done with Bridgerton, once they've done all of the Bridgerton books, I feel like some of the people on that show need to come and they need to give some attention to it, because and I know it's because Bridgerton's absolutely nothing like this series, but Bridgerton is one of the few TV series, like book to TV adaptations, that I actually feel like they possibly maybe do a better job than the books do. And I just feel like that's just that's a big achievement in my eyes. So I feel like I want them to make all of my book to TV adaptations from now on, because I think it's I think they've done, even though it's not a direct lift, I think almost they've elevated it and made it better with the changes that they've made. But that is my opinion. It may be a controversial one. But I'd love to see it.
Yeah, I haven't read the Bridgerton books, but we've just been covering and enjoying the series as is. So I know fans of the books, though, have passionate opinions about what's been included and what's not been included.
I will say the books are a product of their time. They are sort of very much early 2000s. I think even Julia Quinn has said that there are some things in there that if the books were written now, they wouldn't be in there. And I think what the team behind the Netflix show have decided, the decisions they've made, because I think in both of the romances they've had so far, there have been deliberate changes to sort of how they've come about, but I think that better. I just think they're so much better for it. I mean, especially like The Viscount Who Loved Me, which is the book that season 2 is based on, is one of my absolute favorites. And despite the fact that it is one of my favorites of the series, I adore the adaptation. It's perfect. It's everything. I just love them both so much, and they are now my visualization of the characters. That's who they are. So yeah, Incense and Sensibility is a great. Honestly, I'm so jealous. It's such a fun list of just like everything, but just a lot of love and fun, and it's going to be amazing. So you've both struggled over your lists. Do you both have any honorable mentions that you really had?
I mean, going off the Rajay family series, I would say Recipe for Persuasion would be my honorable mention, because that is, I'm gonna say I think that is my favorite of the series, just because I think Rico and I'm forgetting her name right now. Ashna. Rico and Ashna are so great, and the way they kind of make each other better is really beautiful. So that's my honorable mention.
I love a second chance romance that sort of harkens back, especially when it's like they were together when they were like a lot younger, and then they come back together later in life. It's great. It's such a good second chance romance. It's amazing. I feel like I need to reread that now. Honestly, I have plans this weekend. I have stuff to do.
All our plans are getting derailed now.
No, you don't. You have things to read.
No, I have things to read now. No longer things to do. Jillian, honorable mention or multiple?
An honorable. Okay, two quick honorable mentions. One is The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. That was really the first contemporary romance book that I ever read that really made me sit up and be like, holy crap, this is a great book, and it's so first person, and it's such a slow burn that I was just like on the edge of my seat the whole time, like, are they going to get together or not? Like, what's happening here? And the other one that I have is another webcomic called Let's Play by Mongi. And it's another great sort of like love quadrangle, if you will, where it follows a young woman who is a gamer. She's also a game developer, and she is kind of intertwined over the course of many episodes between like her hot friend, her hot neighbor, and her hot coworker. I mean, it's a like / boss, but it's just like, I don't know. I love these sort of like wish fulfillment-y series of like, how's a girl to choose?
Yeah, I mean, in a world where it's often hard to find one good choice.
Yeah.
Having 3 doesn't sound very...
Yeah.
Well, they are all great, stellar recommendations. I might have to stop doing the podcast just to not have so many book recommendations given to me. But it's something nice for. I'm very, very glad that I've got all of these amazing things to read. If listeners wanted to check out any of your additional recommendations, shall we, just for the benefit of everyone, just to recap all 5 of your choices, just so that they can, I don't know, write them down in case they're writing a book shopping list at the moment and they want to check them out. Yolanda, do you want to go first and list your 5?
Yeah, so we had our shared book of Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, of course. And then mine were The Fault in Our Stars by John Green, Anna and the French Kiss by Stephanie Perkins, All American Girl by Meg Cabot, and Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan.
Yes. And Jillian, your 5?
Mine is also Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, The Kiss Quotient by Helen Hoang, Lore Olympus by Rachel Smythe, Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell, and Incense and Sensibility by Sonali Dave.
Excellent. And they are great lists that I just, so much fun. I actually can't come, just fun. Good fun reading. Escapism, that's what we like in reading. So,
Mm-hmm.
good enjoyment. So if any listeners wanted to hear any more of your book recommendations, hear more about the kind of things you're watching as well, because that's one of the segments I really like from your podcast, where might they find you and all of your bookish content?
Yeah, you can follow us on social media at the Pemberley, and we're across all podcast platforms at the Pemberley Podcast. And we just finished, we're about to wrap up recording, discussing Sonali Dave's latest book, The Emma Project. We'll be diving into Sanditon Season 2 very shortly, so that'll be fun. But we just cover a lot of Jane Austen retellings, adaptations, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Excellent. And yeah, I definitely recommend people go check out the podcast and check out you guys if they want to listen to, well, they want to follow this podcast, be much appreciated. We're on all podcast platforms and on YouTube now. And you can follow the podcast at Books to Last Pod on Instagram and Twitter. So, Yolanda Jillian, thank you so much for being on. It's been so much fun, and yeah, I have really enjoyed talking about books with you guys, so thank you so much.
Thank you. This was a really great challenge, and now we have our desert island beach house books off the coast of Genovia.
Excellent. And all the pairs you could possibly want.
Yes.
So yeah, listeners, thank you so much for listening. Yolanda Jillian, thank you so much for being on, and until next time, bye for now.
Bye.